He always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity this afternoon at 2, right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560. The Answer.
Dan and Amy, Harry Truman said, nothing new in this world, just the history you don't know. Interesting piece in the Wall Street Journal by Lee Edwards, who is a fellow at the Heritage Foundation now. He was the director of information for Barry Goldwater's 1964 presidential campaign, and he recounts in this piece in the Journal how LBJ used the machinery of the state, FBI, CIA, to wiretap and otherwise spy on the Goldwater campaign in 64 illegally. Confirmed by former CIA Director William Colby and others. The FBI arranged for widespread wiretapping of the Goldwater campaign. Campaign reporters could soon be heard asking specific questions about, for example, the candidates' travel plans that had only been discussed by Goldwater aides behind closed doors. So I guess some 50 years later, this is version 2.0 of that, or at least it could be. Spygate, as President Trump is calling it. He had the revelation over the weekend of Stefan Halper being embedded in the Trump campaign and striking up a friendship with Carter Page, communicating with Sam Clovis, national co-campaign director for the Trump campaign, as well as George Papadopoulos. And then early in the week, you had Michael Caputo, who's testified before Congress before, eviscerated the Mueller investigation for negatively impacting his life, on the borderline of bankrupting, I think is what he was suggesting. And he was on with Laura Ingraham and said that Stefan Halper, that's not the only shoe to drop.
In Russia, they call this Siloviki, the national security leadership that secretly spies on the entire citizenry of Russia. And here we are in the United States with our own Siloviki underneath President Obama. Let me tell you something that I know for a fact. This informant, this person that they tried to plant into the campaign and even into the administration, if you believe Axios, he's not the only person that came at the campaign. And the FBI is not the only Obama agency that came at the campaign. I know because they came at me. And I'm looking for clearance from my attorney to reveal this to the public. This is just the beginning. And I'll tell you, when we finally find out the truth about this, Director Clapper and the rest of them are going to be wearing some orange suits.
Well, that would be a banner day if that does come to pass. And now we're pleased to be joined by Michael Caputo, Republican strategist and media consultant, former Trump campaign advisor. I assume he's gotten cleared by his attorney, and he's going to tell us the agency and the name today. Michael, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Good, thank you. So where does that stand with what you're able to talk about with respect to your experience on the campaign in the context of Spygate?
Well, in fact, I was approached twice by two different people in two different states, actually, completely unrelated to each other. The first one was the one in early May that I discussed on television this week, which was a national security government contractor contacted me through an intermediary, an old friend of mine, and said that the National Security Agency had Hillary Clinton-related emails that we might be able to get them for the campaign, and was offering to give us a hand. I talked through the intermediary with this gentleman for about 2 weeks, maybe a little less. And at the end, because I'm a veteran of the United States Army, I had a security clearance back in those days. I went through all the briefings. I knew that if any of this material was classified, that I would be in real legal trouble. So I took a pass on it. I told him to go through the regular whistleblower process and that the world would be interested, just not through me. And then this national security, a former national security government contractor, just dropped out of sight, didn't contact us anymore. That bothered me for 2 years. For 2 years, I scratched my head. And the intermediary, a very dear friend of mine, we would meet for dinner when I visited Washington. And, of course, it would come up during dinner, and he was scratching his head. We could never figure it out. And then, of course, in October of 2016, we had the dump from WikiLeaks. When we were told that these emails were being held by the NSA, this former contractor said that he had seen two documents that he believed were emails. One of them was discussing the how the Swedish government and a Swedish company had given $26 million to the Clinton Foundation in exchange for a waiver to deal with Iran around the sanctions. That company got that waiver. Now, that story had been reported a little bit by conservative media in 2015. But lo and behold, when the WikiLeaks dump came at the end of October, the big October surprise, within those emails was one or a series starring Hillary Clinton's campaign manager talking about how the Swedish situation was very worrisome. Now that, of course, set up a red flag for me and my friend, the intermediary. It kept bothering us for a long time. 2 years we didn't know what to think. And then, of course, this weekend, what happens, it's revealed that Stefan Halper who was paid by the Department of Defense, a former CIA operative, was working as an FBI informant tracking these members of the campaign policy committee. So immediately I knew, because, I had revealed this approach to the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, and the Mueller investigation. And I had given all of them the telephone number of my friend, the intermediary, to give them an opportunity to figure this out. And they never called him. They didn't seem interested. In fact, when I spoke to the Mueller team, they didn't even take notes. I offered them a copy of the overview that I had read to them, the timeline I had read to them. They didn't want it. So I just thought it was important to bring it up. I believe that government contractor could be involved in some of this spying. And I think the Department of Justice Inspector General should sort that out. The president, very wisely, over the weekend, demanded that the Inspector General of the DOJ expand his investigation into things that the Obama administration had done to include these approaches to the campaign. Once he did that, I felt free to talk about it, and my attorney is contacting the Department of Justice Inspector General and requesting an opportunity for me to come in and tell them exactly what happened.
Then why are top Democrats, some who saw some of this evidence yesterday, claiming that there is no evidence of spying in Trump's campaign? I mean, you had Adam Schiff up there. Paul Ryan was reserved and said that's classified information. I'm not giving you an answer, but are they seeing something that's not there?
Well, I mean, Adam Schiff has a tell if you watch him. You know when he's lying
yes,
because
his mouth
lips
is moving.
are moving.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. He's an inveterate liar, and he does it with impunity because he has the protections of a Congress. He's allowed to say whatever he wants from the halls of Congress. So he's a liar. It's been proven.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, what's really interesting to me is that in the 1970s, the Democrats were up in arms about very similar misbehavior by the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, spying on the American people. And they put together the Church Committee, if you remember that, Frank Church, a Senate Select Committee, to examine this, which resulted in over 100 members of the FBI, the NSA, and especially the CIA were let go, fired. And for decades, new people would come into the CIA, and the old grizzled veterans would say, hey, whatever you do, don't break the law, because that's going to happen to you. You'll get fired. Now the Democrats who were cheering that on back in the late 70s and continue to look at the Church Committee as heroic work are confused by why we would want a similar examination of Obama's FBI, NSA, and other national security organizations.
I want to go back to something that you said, though. These names that you said contacted you, the people that you said contacted you, that you were suspicious of. You turn these names over to House and Senate, the relevant House and Senate committees before which you've testified, to the Mueller team, and nobody was ever followed up with. Is it your supposition that they were not followed up with because they're sort of known assets of law enforcement that were embedded in Trump's campaign?
Frankly, the first time I turned it over to the House Intelligence Committee was, I think, early this year. And, of course, I every time I called my buddy, the intermediary, he said, nope, haven't heard from him. And then the same thing happened at the Senate and the Mueller Committee early this month, the 1st and 2nd of May. No call to the intermediary. And I was just like, Maybe they think it's kooky. Maybe they'll get around to it. Maybe they're just terrible investigators. Maybe their phones are broken. I couldn't figure it out. And then when the Stephen Halper thing came to light, I thought, well, here's what it might be.
Yep.
And I thought it was my duty as an American citizen and a supporter of the President of the United States to make this known.
How do you know that the two individuals you're referring to were with a specific specific law enforcement or intelligence agencies?
The intermediary is somebody I've known for many years. He later joined the Trump campaign. He was only approached because he was a friend of mine. And then the original, the former government contractor knew that he could get to me through him. So I don't consider him to be the least bit culpable for any of this. But the primary, the government contractor, I didn't know what he was. I couldn't figure it out. And we were actually reaching out to him earlier this year to try to, poke at it a little more, and he didn't get back to us. And I just kind of dropped it and gave it to the committees because that's their job. So, he could, this could be a big misunderstanding, but it could also be the keys to the kingdom of God. It's somewhere in between is probably the answer. And it's the responsibility of the Inspector General to figure that out.
During your time on the Trump campaign, was there any discussions among senior staff and advisors about the possibility that the campaign was being surveilled?
We used to talk about it a bit, that our phones were being bugged. It was kind of idle chatter. We were warned, not officially, but by senior officials that it might happen or that might have happened. We didn't really... we didn't sweep the place or anything like that. But, you hear that kind of chatter on a presidential campaign. I didn't pay it any mind. But I'll tell you, it sure looked like that chatter was pretty prescient.
He is Michael Caputo, Republican political strategist and media consultant, former Trump campaign advisor. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.